So perhaps Lakwinder could start.
Just now I can start.
Yeah, please.
Are you able to listen to me?
Yeah, we are all listening.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to welcome all the participants. Formally, it is a matter of great pleasure and happiness that the Indialics starting this inaugural webinar lecture series today. And we are very happy to have Professor B.K. Lundwall, who is having conversation with Professor K.J. Joseph, Rishikesh Krishna, and the core committee members and large number of participants which are the member of the network of Indialics. I would like to extend my hearty welcome on behalf of India. I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to the Gulati Institute of Finance and Taxation, Trivandrum, for giving us an opportunity to host this inaugural lecture. Uh, uh, in the times of uncertainty, the whole world is nowadays in a great difficult times due to coronavirus 19 pandemic and the healthcare system, which is in under great strain. And you'll find that during this particular period of time, the economy, society, polity, and healthcare system in particular are under great stress. However, you'll find that large number of innovative new initiatives has been taken by large number of people who are participating in economic, social, and political economic activities. Therefore, you'll find that it is time for the Indialics networks to understand the kind of situation which is taking place, especially the 21st century innovation and development, which is the direction in which it is taking. But one of the very important point which one has the system and where the very biggest we has innovation, talking about innovation which diseases. But you'll find that the kind of pandemic which we have been observing, you'll find that the highly human health, human development index countries of the world have faced a great strain and stress, and you'll find that actually to a kind of great stress and kind of observing institutes not able to meet the have been national institutional systems very difficult and system difficulty. And you'll find this is the time when will is going to be motivated, the key kind of global system as well as the in particular to kind of as the able to overcome will be able to answer the countries in facing the time for of during long period of time, lesson of new arms on the new that you'll find that forces on the new ways and these forces kind of fields of difficulties with vendors we have from and for this particular farming area requires that self-debate and action to look as well look for this has how we able to take decisions to back come out of the kind of situation which we are now. I think that this talk will be enlightening around how we will be founders of global network networks.
Please, only audio. You, Lakwinder, please switch off your video. Your line is not good to support both. Hello.
Lakwinder sir, please unmute yourselves and switch off the video.
I'm not.
Yes.
Yeah, now it's fine. Now it's fine. Go ahead.
Fine.
Switch off the
Are you
video.
able to listen to me? Are you able to listen to me?
Yes. Please switch off your video. That's better. Switch off your video. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so I think that we will be. I just like to extend hearty welcome to Professor B.K. Lundwell, as well as the whole community of Indialics network members, and I wish that this lecture series will have a grand success. Thank you very much, and I now invite Professor K.J. Joseph and Rishikesh Krishna to kindly take over take over and conduct the proceedings of today's lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lakwinder Singh. And good evening to all of you once again. We must say that today is a very happy day for Indialics. Despite all of us are going through an unprecedented time of crisis because of the COVID-19 pandemic, as Professor Lakwinder Singh rightly said. Why I say we are happy? Because of this problem, we thought of using the e-platform to come together and start the first activity or first online-based activity of Indialics. And I was not very sure whether we will be able to get Professor Lundwal when I asked him, because why I was hesitant, because I'll tell you a bit later. He has actually almost retired from all the formal activities. He is in fact, he says, enjoying his life with reflecting deeply on issues which he thinks very important. First of all, I thank Professor Lundwal for kindly agreeing to join us. And as always, he is very innovative in every sense. He said, Joseph, I don't want to give you a big lecture. Why don't we talk? Just an informal conversation. And we as students, we all know that we all learned much more through the informal conversations from our friends in the hostel rather than the great lectures by the great teachers in the teaching blocks. So his idea of an informal conversation, given his commitment to learning, I thought the best idea. And thank you, secondly, for this wonderful idea of doing the opening activity of Indialics in a most innovative and a manner that will augment learning. I know that none who have logged in needs an introduction of Professor Lundwal. But we in India, we are highly ceremonious oriented, So we have to have a welcome. We need to have an introduction. These are very important. Otherwise, people at the end of the day, we will have an evaluation. They will say very poor because there's no introduction. So for the sake of that, I'm going to do an introduction. I don't know how I will introduce Professor Lundwal, All of you knows him. So I think I will consider him as an eminent scholar like many others, but very different. Eminent scholars are known for their eminently useful ideas given on the issues that they are concerned about. Here is a professor. He has given eminently useful ideas, but he has taken that ideas more towards action. Not only conceived idea, but also he has taken that ideas to actions. And that is precisely why, being one of the person who coined or first time used the word national system of innovation in 1985, and in 1987, Christopher Freeman, in his book, Technology, Policy and Economic Performance, used the term National System of Innovation, taking from Frederick List's work. I will stop immediately. Frederick List. And he has taken that idea of national innovation system to its logical conclusion by working with Christopher Freeman and none other than Richard Nelson, Professor Richard Nelson. And after that, he didn't stop there, because you know that interactive learning is the essence of National System of Innovation concept. He took that agenda forward to forming a network called the Globalics, which is one of the most vibrant academic platform that talks about innovation. And that platform uses a concept of national system of innovation, which, according to Fagenberg and Sapasot, in the psychometric basic study published in Science and Public Policy in 2011, National System of Innovation system is the most popular perspective in innovation studies. And later he came up with ideas like what is called learning economy and user-producer interaction, and which earlier. And most importantly, the latest contribution from him is perhaps conceptualizing innovation from a narrow science-based innovation to a much more of a broader way of innovation in terms of DUI mode of learning, which is very important when you are trying to link innovation to development. My dear friends, while I'm sitting in Kerala, you all know that Kerala is head and shoulders above other states in terms of development. This is not because of so much of STI. It is not because we have the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center in Kerala. It is not because of other, but because of innovations of different types that essentially involve DUI type of mode learning. So I would like to say that, here is a person, and he formed the Globalics, and he very meticulously worked out its progress and handed over to an elected group of representatives, and that election, I don't want to talk more. And he slowly and gracefully withdrew from that. With great difficulty, only I could persuade him to come for Accra conference, wherein he was not willing to speak. Then, okay, at least in the dinner time, can you say something? Okay, dinner time, I can say something to you. So normally we know that many people establish organizations and they will never ever leave it until they die. Even if they die in the coffin, they will ask, okay, where is my organization? So what I'm trying to say there is, here is a wonderful human being, because I know Professor Lundwal from almost 2003 or 2002 onwards. And then he wanted me to converse with me. I thought there should be at least one more person. I thought of all the steering committee members of Indialics are eminently suited to talk with him, in fact, more than me. But then I thought there is one guy whom you invited, Professor Lundwal invited to first Globalics International Conference in 1993, I might say, yeah, in Brazil. That was none other than Rishikesh T. Krishnan. And Rishikesh T. Krishnan and me jointly organized the 4th Globalics conference in Trivandrum. So I thought the oldest friend of Lundwal is here, Professor Rishikesh T. Krishnan, who was, he has traveled a long distance. He's no more that small fry. He's a big man. He was director of Indian Institute of Management until recently. Now he has taken over as, or rather taking over as the director of Indian Institute of Bangalore. I don't think that there are many people who have been, who could manage to become the director of two IIMs. So first of all, I congratulate Professor Rishikesh Dixon for this new job, and I'm very sure he will do a wonderful job of it. And I once again thank Professor Bandoke Lunduwal and welcome you. And over to you, Rishikesha. I am very sure you will have much more to say than what I said. I am sorry that I have taken 3 minutes more than what I thought. I'm sorry about it.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you,
Rishi,
Joseph.
unmute yourself.
I think it's already unmuted. Can you hear? Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible. Yes,
Good afternoon.
please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Joseph, for your kind words. May I add my word of welcome to Professor Lundwal. Thank you very much for joining us on this Saturday afternoon. Let me just add a few words on terms of how we will conduct this event this afternoon. So we will start with Joseph and myself asking a few questions to Professor Lundwal. We will try to keep that limited to about 20 minutes to half an hour. And then the remaining time we have, we will throw it open to questions by other friends from the Indialics network. So if I may, I will just start by asking the first question to Professor Lundwal. And then after I ask that question, Joseph can take over for the next question. So Professor Lundwal, once again, thank you for being with us. Joseph gave his view on what are your major contributions to innovation studies. But looking from your own perspective and with the benefit of all these years of involvement with this field, in today's context, what do you see as your most important contribution? And what is the context which you would associate with that contribution?
Professor Lundwal, unmute yourself. Unmute. Professor Lundwal, please unmute.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Is that okay now?
You're okay now. You're okay. We are here. We are hearing you.
And if there's any kind of problem with the sound,
Yes,
you should let me know, and I will take off the picture or something like that. Okay?
Okay.
First, I want to say that it's a great occasion for me to have the possibility to reach out to colleagues in Indialics, all of you. I think technology is a fantastic thing, making it possible to have this kind of conversation across the whole world. I think that is great. But having said that, I really miss being with you in more physical form. You know, I have a weakness for looking people deeply in their eyes when I talk to them, and even do some hugging and touching. And this is not at all allowed in this COVID period. I have some abstinence on that, so I do a lot of hugging with my wife. That's the only permitted one. I think Indialics is a great a great initiative, and I know KJ and some of your close colleagues initiated Indialics very early on in the history of GlobalX. I think it was in around 2003 or 4, and I think India has a very long and important tradition in science and science technology studies, but when we started to collaborate. I think the emphasis on innovation in the broader sense was not that strong in India. And I think actually the presence of GlobalX and especially Indialics has actually had an impact, which I think is to the best for India and Indian people, and I'm very happy for that. So, having said that, I would like to try to respond to your question. I think, as you said, KJ, he already, to some degree, signaled some of the things that I've been working with, and you might say one of the first things that I realized, and I'm going to come back a little more in detail and in how I reached that insight, was the importance of regarding innovation as an interactive process. And of course, this stands to some degree in contrast to a more linear approach where you assume that science more or less automatically will be transformed into technology, innovation, and in economic growth. The role of users at different levels and the competence of users, I realized that this is quite important. Is there any problem with the sound?
Very good. No problem.
Okay, good. So I think that was one of the first insights, and of course this is not new, and very little. One of the general insights from innovation studies is that new ideas are either new versions of old ideas or new combinations of old ideas. So what you can do, and I think what I did in that case was to insist more strongly and more clearly on something that other people had already captured in different ways. I mean, Nathan Rosenberg had done a lot about interaction in developing of historically of technology machinery for textiles and so on. So that I think I did. I insisted that this is really important, and I wrote a booklet on user-producer interaction and product innovation, which also was a criticism of standard microeconomics, because what I tried to show there was that pure markets in the form they are presented in textbooks in microeconomics are not really good for innovation at all. The only reason that we have innovation is that markets are organized with a linkage, with some kind of interaction and communication which goes beyond prices and quantities. So that was, I think, quite important. And I had the opportunity when I visited Stanford in 1984 to discuss this with one of the leading microeconomists in the world, Kenneth Arrow. I insisted that he should read my paper. He didn't have time, but at the end he did, and we had a discussion at the faculty club in Stanford, which was extremely important for me because it gave me some self-confidence that my ideas were not completely silly. I mean, he actually accepting the basic idea that if you want to have innovation, you need to have interaction in other forms than pure market relationship. And that was quite important for me. But you mentioned national systems of innovation. And of course, this is a concept which has become quite widely used all over the world. And it was developed in collaboration with colleagues in Aalborg. You know, I have had been affiliated to Aalborg University since 1973, and we formed a small group there, which was called the IKE group, which refers to international competitiveness. We developed a criticism of international competitiveness discussions as they were taken in Denmark, assuming that it all had to do with cost and wages. And the idea among the dominant economists was if we only get lower wages, we get a stronger competitiveness. And we did not really believe that. And we studied in comparison all major economies, and we found that the most competitive economies were those where you had high and growing wages. And of course, that had to do with something else. And we realized it must have to do with innovation and competence building and so on. So we started a research group which worked together. I'm still working together with some of these people who started the group. Now there is a younger generation taking over. But what we early on came up with was some idea of the innovative capability of the national production system, a very complex concept. The innovative capability of the national production system. And then at some point, I proposed, let's refer to it as the national innovation system. And this happened at the same time as we had Christopher Freeman as a guest professor. He came from SPRU. I guess probably most of you have heard of Chris Freeman. He was really my mentor. Was about 20 years older, but had a fantastic personal relationship. He was an outstanding scholar and a fantastic human being. So together we discussed about this, and we gradually introduced the idea of national innovation system. Actually, Chris Freeman wrote about the national innovation system in a working paper for OECD. You know OECD, the kind of rich countries collaboration think tank. And we had a project where I was a member, a project group, which was on science, technology, and competitiveness. And in this paper, Chris, for the first time, referred to national innovation system, and that was, I think, 1982. So he was really the very first one. So both my colleagues in Aalborg, Björn Jonsson, Espen Slott Anderson, and others, and Chris Freeman, and later on Richard Nelson, were extremely important, so to say, discussion partners in developing this concept. And again, I would say this could be. You have a problem, Joseph?
Yeah,
You
I'm
have
hearing.
the sound on.
No problem.
Okay. So this leads me to another general point, that
Yes.
most interesting insights in innovation studies, they come from people working together, people with different background, with different ideas. So the idea of a kind of great individuals who by themselves produce fantastic ideas, I don't believe much in that. And I don't think innovation studies support that this is the normal thing. Having access to a team of people who like to work together, but who are quite different, I think is an excellent way of pursuing research. So that was about the national innovation systems. I would like to mention for you that, sorry, I have a paper here, um, that one way we developed ideas in Aalborg was through major empirical projects. Uh, I would like to mention three different projects. One took place 1980 to 1984, and it was called the MIKE project, M-I-K-E, and it referred to the role of information technology. We call it that at that time microelectronics, and how would that affect the Danish economy? And the way we studied this was to select four different, what we call industrial complexes. So we studied the interaction between users and producers of these information and communication technologies in relation to agriculture, in relation to textile industry, in relation to public sector computing, and in relation to environmental industrial complex. So what we found there was, of course, that um, the role of users was quite important. The competence of users was sometimes more, at least as important as the competence of the producer or the supplier of the technology. And this was what inspired me to work out the paper 1984, and it was published in 1985 on user-producer interaction and product innovation. I presented this paper first at SPRU and later at University in Stanford, as I mentioned before. Later on, we went on, we made another big project, which was called the PIKE project. And that was about the productivity, what you call it, paradox. The productivity paradox in Denmark was even more extreme than any other countries. I guess some of you have heard of the Solov paradox. The Solov paradox is that we see a lot of computers, but we cannot see the impact on productivity. In Denmark, we had a more extreme version of that. We had a lot of investment in information technology, but productivity was even falling in manufacturing at the same time. Nobody could explain that, so we were asked to establish a group to do research on this. And what we found was that firms, organizations that introduced advanced new technology and did nothing else, they had great productivity problems. The ones which had success changed their organization and they upgraded the skills of their employees broadly, widely. So in a sense, since economic performance will reflect at least as much the diffusion and use of technology as the development of the technology, this is very important insight because it means that you need to give much more attention to the role of ordinary people in and the form of organization if you want to have productivity impact. Finally, after that, I had in parallel with the Pike project, I edited the 1992 book on national systems of innovation, and it included chapters from most members of the I group, but also from excellent international scholars, including Christopher Freeman, Jan Fagerberg, and others. In that book, I stated that knowledge is the most important resource in the economy, and learning is the most important process. I would say now that I still think this is true. And this is why I'm going to come back to it later on. I think it's extremely important to develop our standing, our fundamental understanding in terms of basic research on what knowledge is in relation to the economy and how learning takes place. But I'll come back to that. But when I came back, then I worked 92, 95, I worked at OECD, the think tank of the rich countries. And during that period, OECD adopted a certain version of the NSI concept. And that had, of course, a big impact because when OECD is accepting something, it becomes legitimate in all member countries and also in other countries. When I came back from OECD, I decided I couldn't work in such an organization more than 3 years. It was very competitive, very much US dominated, not a very nice place to be. Actually, Chris Freeman warned me before going there. Everybody else said, go and take that job. You get a lot of money and you became very famous and important. But Chris Freeman said, don't do it. It's not a nice place, and he was right. So I went back to little nice Aalborg University with my good friends. And actually, it might tell you something about the Danish mentality. When I came to the first meeting in my research group, they treated me like I had been to the bathroom and come back into the room again. Nobody asked me what I've been doing, if I had some interesting experience. They just say, hello, Bal, you're here again? Okay, here we go. Now we take the agenda for this meeting. That's the way Danish is. Not very ceremonious, absolutely the opposite. Okay, when I came back, I organized the biggest empirical project so far, which was the DISCO project. And here we try to capture all important dimensions of the Danish innovation system. And we try to bring in also lessons from the concept, the learning economy, where and one of the main lessons was that inclusive aspects of the national innovation system are very important for its performance. the active participation of workers and the importance of low economic and social distance between managers and workers stimulated innovation. And in the beginning of the new millennium, we followed up on this. I did together with Edward Lawrence on European data showing that workers' participation correlate positively with innovation among European countries. When I give some talk about these projects, it's because I think one can draw some lessons. I mean, all there's a very close, in innovation studies at least, very close relationship between theoretical ideas and empirical works. You have some basic ideas about the innovation process, and you can say that the core is about heterogeneous agents with different kinds of competencies, capabilities, and knowledge interact and learn from each other and combine existing ideas into new ideas. I think that's the core. But then when you develop this core, you get very important inspiration and insights from your empirical work. And as I said before, if you have the possibility to form reasonably big teams of people with a different disciplinary background, different kind of style of research. If you have, and you can that I think is one of the best ways to develop good economic, good innovation theory. That was my point with talking about these three projects. So I hope, I don't know, is this too long kind of answer? Would you prefer shorter ones?
No, no, you are never longer. Hello, am I
Yeah,
audible?
yeah, okay.
Rishi, can I go ahead? Rishi? Yeah, you are never longer. You are never longer. But I think it was a fascinating account of how you evolved over time. I think, but I have some reason to believe that you are someone sleeping in the north or developing countries, living in developing country and dreaming about the south. Because in Globalix network, you always talk about interaction with the south, innovation and development for the south. Now the key question which we want to ask you is, all your ideas are based on the experience of developed, mature, capitalist countries with very seasoned, established institutions, unlike in a country like India. You know about little, I know you know about India. So why do you think how this concept is relevant for a country like India? What will be your response?
That is a very good question. Just let me start by going back to my very early youth. My favorite, when I went to college, I started to read a Swedish economist. I grew up in Sweden. I started to read a Swedish economist by the name Gunnar Myrdal. I don't know if you have heard about him.
Yeah.
He's written very important books, including 3-volume on what he called Asian drama.
He lived in India. That's his life.
And he wrote more easy to get smaller books, which I read and I actually at that time I had some kind of dream that I could become as good as Gunnar Myrdal. Also with focus on the importance of developing countries. So I had very early on this kind of I wanted to contribute to a world which was with less inequality and a more fair world. I had this idea. And I share that 100% with Chris Freeman. I mean, Chris Freeman did not do research to become famous. He did it because he wanted to change the world. But nonetheless, it's true that for different reasons, my research to begin with was very much linked to the experience of small countries in the north of the world, very well-off countries, very homogeneous, and actually doing research in Denmark was quite rewarding in a sense because we had very unique access to data. We could get the Central Statistical Authority to organize surveys with private firms. And when they did that, they also could add to the survey results great amounts of statistical facts, which made it possible for us to in a sense, analyze issues which would not be possible to analyze in another kind of context. So it's true, most of our research took place. But it's not just that simple, because some of our early ideas were inspired by ideas from development economics. The ideas of cumulative causation and things like that, which we found much more relevant than standard neoclassical versions of explaining economic development. But it's true, and if we take the concept national innovation system, I got a phone call to my office in Aalborg. I think around 2003 or something like that, and there was a guy who was working at Tsinghua, a Canadian guy, de Bresson, who called me and said, "Would you like to become professor here in China at Tsinghua? They want you to come here." And I said, "This is a practical joke. I don't believe you. I mean, why the hell would they like to have me as professor in China? I am a small guy from a small university in a small country. Why don't they ask for some big guy from a big country?" And he said, "No, it's no joke. It's no joke. They will even pay you a lot of money to come here." And I said, "This is not the important thing, but to get to China and understand what's going on in China is of course very attractive." So I went there and I worked there for years, half a year. They wanted me full time, but I said half a year every year is more suitable, because I wanted to keep my connection to my research group and my wife and everything back in Denmark. So I worked there, and I realized the reason they wanted me was that they were taking the concept of national innovation system very seriously. And at that time, and I think this is quite interesting, the very top leaders of the Communist Party, almost all of them had either natural science or primarily a technical background. Several of them were professors or at least all of them, I think, PhDs with this kind of background. And for them, it was obvious that the way forward for China was to invest heavily in knowledge, to invest heavily in research and development, to engage strongly in developing strategic technologies. And they found this concept, National Innovation System, as extremely useful to organize their long-term planning. I mean, their plans, I think, from 2006, 5, and 6, they refer to something they call building a national innovation system with Chinese characteristics. At that time, when I was there, I had great freedom of speech. I remember I told the students that if you just repeat, we were making problem-based project learning. So they were going to write projects about different topics. And I said, if you only repeat what I say or what the Communist Party says, you get very bad grades. And they were slightly shocked, perhaps, but very quickly they realized that thinking by themselves was a very good idea and very interesting, and they actually did it as well as my students, or even better, because they were elite students than students in Denmark or France or elsewhere. Now I know, I'm afraid that I'm not sure I could say the same thing if I went back to China. Now I'm aware that some of my colleagues, very good colleagues in China, they indicate that the situation is not that good anymore. But it's just to say that it was different that time. And then I made a lot of I tried to analyze the innovation policy of China together with Xu Linggu, who is a fantastic scholar, one of the best I ever met in the world. I knew her already since beginning of the 1990s when she came to OECD, but when I came to China, we worked together. And some of the things I learned were quite interesting. First, besides the very extreme investment in knowledge, I mean, R&D was growing with 20% a year in China, and now they have R&D intensity higher than Europe. Huh? And besides that, I found that the kind of pragmatic approach of the Chinese leaders, where they made use of markets and planning after what works best. This stands in contrast to Western ideology, where the market is always the best, and it's only exceptional that you may use a non-market allocation mechanism. The other thing which is not so well known is that there's a lot of experimenting going on in China at regional level. Very often regional authorities did stuff or took initiatives which were not officially allowed. But when they worked, the central level tended to accept them and diffuse them and use them more widely. So there were some specific aspects of this which made possible for China to grow. When I take this example of China, I'm very aware that there are big differences between China and India. But you have something in common. You have the big size. And in this era, and I'm coming back to that later, big size matters a lot. It has become a major factor when it comes to develop capabilities in critical technologies such as artificial intelligence and other digital new technologies. But my point is also to say that the example of China shows that you could develop a national system with Indian characteristics, which would be hopefully in some respects different and more diverse and open than the Chinese characteristics. But I think I still think the idea of, as I said before, looking at knowledge as the most important resource, learning as the most important process, looking at learning as an interactive process, bringing in the idea of DUI and learning economy, broadening the concept of innovation to include all kind of actors, including farmers and workers, etc. I think that is highly relevant for a country like India.
Thank you, Bal. Joseph, shall I ask the next question?
Yeah.
Can't hear you, Joseph. I think you're muted.
Before Rishi asking another question, I would like to say that we will perhaps stop with one or two questions, one maximum one or two. Then floor will be open, and wherein we invite you to ask questions through chat mode. That may be better, perhaps. Rishi, please go ahead.
Yeah, Bal. So my last question is, in recent days, we might have some doubts about how well embedded globalization is. But in the last 20 to 30 years, it did look as though globalization as a paradigm had taken root. So my question to you is, how relevant is the concept of the national system or the perspective of the national system in a globalized economy? And how do you see that changing now with the kind of changes we are seeing in globalization itself?
I think there's been a kind of pendulum movement back and forth of globalization and focus on the nation states. We had after the Second World War, the U.S. and the other Western states dominated the formation of a series of economic world organizations like the World Bank, IMF, etc. And they constituted a kind of framework for growing tendency towards international trade, etc. And in the 1980s, we had the deregulation of financial markets. And after that, we could see how global value chain trade was growing. And that found place until around 2008 with the crisis, because after the crisis already we could see a change in the trend. We could see that global value chain trade either stagnated or actually fell back to lower levels than before. And then what happened is, of course, that the race of China within this kind of institutional framework, which had been, in a sense, constructed under the dominance of United States, the rise of China became seen as a kind of threat to U.S. hegemony, to their total dominance in politically and economic terms in the world. There is something coming up on my screen here. Okay, it disappeared. Then what happened was that China has always combined openness with a certain techno-nationalism. I mean, they have been open in certain respects, but not in all respects. And this became strengthened when they developed their focus on what they call indigenous innovation. And now US has moved at least as far in that direction. So you can say that the pendulum has shifted back and forth, and now I think it's very important to understand the role of national systems in this context. Both its so to say its limits and how it might make it more difficult to solve global problems like climate warming, etc. But so I think that it was actually globalization itself which created more focus on national systems, and now the reappearance of techno-nationalism make it still important to understand the concept.
Thank you, Bal. That's very interesting, very useful. Joseph, would you like to move to the questions on the chat?
Can we ask questions? Hello?
Mamumuchi.
Okay. Okay, that's
No,
great.
Mamo.
To have here. Mamo, welcome. I'm from Pretoria in South Africa.
After
So
the
lovely
lecture,
to see you, Bal.
see the lecture can. Mamo, I think Bal may get tired. We should not unnecessarily exhaust him, but we will talk a bit later. In between, Bal, there are a number of questions like now, can you see on your chat, Dinesh Shebrol, your great friend, is asking a question. Are people rich because they are having knowledge? Are they financial capital rich because they have knowledge? Bal, could you please take at the chat on the right side? There are questions.
Okay, this one.
Yeah, chat.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay. And who is asking this question?
This
Tapia Sengupta.
No, this is first one is by Dinesh Abroad. Dinesh is, you know Dinesh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are people rich because they are financial capital, because they have knowledge? They are not Okay, Dinesh Abrol.
Yes.
Nice to hear from you. I like critical questions.
Yes.
And those are certainly critical. Now, I think I mean, I already used a lot of time. If I had even more time, I would have talked about the role of financialization,
Yes.
which I think is a very important global tendency, where the kind of financial system tends to develop its own logic, independent of both of production. Of course, knowledge plays a role in terms of access to data. And it's interesting to note that some of those high-tech giants, which are dominating in like Google, Facebook, etc., they also develop enormous financial resources. They have kind of liquid reserves, which are enormous. So there is a kind of link between a kind of link developing between some aspects of innovation and digital economy and financialization. And the other aspect of that is that those giants are. Is somebody interrupting? Another aspect of that is that some of these giants are experts in avoiding paying taxes. So they transfer enormous financial resources between different parts of the world in order to minimize their tax. So that's another link there. But of course, what should I say about the China innovation puzzle? I think I think there are two things in China, where I do not know exactly how those would be seen in India. One is an extremely strong cultural, popular view that education is the key to success. I think that has been very important. It's not only the leadership with an engineering background, etc., who have pushed the system towards high investment in knowledge. They have had a kind of popular basis where parents have been willing to invest almost everything they have in the education of their children. So, and Mamo must not interrupt. There is somebody interrupting. And then I think that we need to think about national innovation systems in a new way, where we think more about how to give innovation new directions, so that they, as you indicate, give responses to global problems like the planetary crisis and inequality. So I completely agree on that, but that will also require a combination of national efforts, but also much stronger global collaboration. I think we must give the UN a much more important role, and we must hope that the new young generations insist on changing the direction of economic development and innovation in such ways that they get a world to live in which is acceptable both in terms of natural situation and in terms of social situation. Thank you. Is it working?
Yeah, all good.
Should I take more questions or what?
We have more questions, but we would like to keep the audience more time rather than we would like to take. Am I right, Rishi?
Yes, absolutely. Any other
Absolutely.
questions from the audience or
please.
other members of the steering committee or anyone else?
What is on? Is it any panel?
I've given one question, please.
Yeah. Sujit, please.
I've given one in the chat.
You have a question in the chat. Where is the chat? I think is the chat.
At the chat?
Yeah, it is
Yeah,
in the
let's.
chat.
Sujit.
Did you see that? Or shall I speak?
You can speak anyway, but I'm not able to locate the chat. Where is the chat? Not come. Let's see. Come here.
Sujit, maybe you should just go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Professor
Please go.
Lundwall, I met you many years ago. I still remember your hug. And are you able to listen to me?
I'm trying to understand what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah. And what I was saying, I still remember your hug. The question is surrounding new technologies, the cyber physical systems. We human beings have to learn new ways of engaging with these technologies, IoT, autonomous systems, etc. Would like to
He said he's.
know your views on this. How we engage with these new technologies? What will be the new ways of? Thank you.
Krishnan, could you repeat the question? I'm
Yeah,
not sure I got it.
Yeah, so he's asking how should we look at new technologies like cyber physical systems and how human beings will interact with those systems and what impact that will have on innovation.
I think these are very good questions. I mean, we are in a new transformation period where you can say we are moving to much deeper and wider use of digital technologies. And we are faced with the fact that a few giant corporations are dominating digital services. A handful of companies are now among the biggest in the world, and they dominate these things and they do that by having access to data that they collect that they collect from our actions on the web, on the internet, and they make people extremely rich on the basis of harvesting data, and they are also at the same time getting resources to invest enormously in the new digital technologies and artificial intelligence. So I think for innovation scholars, there are different issues here. One is about intellectual property rights. I mean, one thing is that each of us think it's fair enough to that we are protect the things we write, or if we are an artist, the work we do. But is it reasonable that enormous big corporations privatize knowledge and create kind of monopolistic control of knowledge, which are crucial for health, which is crucial for coping with climate change, and which are crucial in developing the technologies of the future in more general. And of course, it has also impact for our private security, that they can actually not only gather our information about us, but use this information to manipulate us in different ways. So there are many issues here, and I think one of the issues is about intellectual property rights in the broad sense, and we need to rethink a lot about that. The other thing is to rethink what it means with knowledge and learning in the next era of where artificial intelligence has become more important. How do we look at the role of human people in relation to what is called machine learning and deep learning by computers? I mean, what kind of learning societies will come out of that? And how to look at innovation. I mean, the new technologies have also the potential, and they're already changing how corporations, big corporations innovate. This has been obvious in pharmaceuticals for a long time, but it is becoming more widely the case that you use artificial intelligence to speed up certain types of innovation processes. So there are many challenges for the next generation of innovation scholars trying to understand the new trends in these respects.
There's another question for you, Professor Lundwall.
Thank
It's
you.
from Kirti Tyagi, and he's asking, what would be your message or piece of advice to newbies like us who are just starting in the field of innovation?
If it's possible for you, you should try to see if you could join an environment where you are not alone, where you can work with good colleagues, and ideally with some nice senior scholars who you could use as role models. And then I mean, it's it depends on the institutional context, because I'm aware that if you, for instance, are an economist, kind of general economist, you might be forced to focus very strongly on selecting topics which are well suited for using specific methods, because a lot of academic career has developed in such a way that it's more important to use very advanced methods of statistics or similar things than it is to understand what's really going on. You sometimes you get the impression that economists get prisoners of their tool shed. I don't know if you understand, because they get captured more by showing off that they can use money. You might need to do that. I mean, if you are working in an environment where this is the only way to get a job, you might need to do that. And then you might have to wait doing extremely interesting work until you get a little more established. This is the reality of life. But hopefully there will be places in India which are more open and where you can combine different methods, statistical, big data, surveys, case studies. I know at some institutions, case studies are not regarded as scientific, and I strongly disagree. I mean, the best way to do research is to combine different methods. And that's another argument in favor of bigger groups where some people can work with some tools and some others with some other tools on the same topic. That's the best way to understand reality. Thank you.
Joseph, would you like to take the next question, please?
No, I think there is I think Rajesh Mani, a question is already on the thing. He is actually, Benduke, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Rajesh asking a question to you. This is related to what was already asked about fourth industrial revolution. His question is, it's already displayed here. Currently, the world is undergoing a major technological change in terms of the so-called fourth industrial revolution. However, all these sectors like robotics are highly knowledge and technology intensive. And in this scenario, how the developing countries of the global south can set up their local innovation systems. That's what he's asking.
Okay. When we had, as I told you, I did a project on microelectronics in 1984, and we were in a similar situation where there was a lot of uncertainty of what was going to happen with the new technology in terms of impact on employment, development, etc. I think the current situation is both similar and different. It is similar in the sense that there will always be a great potential in applying and using the new technology in all different fields, including agriculture, including traditional industry, etc. There will always be a potential, but it will require, of course, a lot of upgrading of skills. It will also, I think, be a good idea to think in terms of inclusion. I mean that you try to give at least basic insights in digital technologies for everyone, a kind of alphabetization thing for spreading it to all people. So I think that is similar. What is different here is that it seems as if the new technologies are pushing towards much stronger concentration and centralization, towards monopolistic control of technologies. And here it's characteristic that the size of the country and of your home market seems to become a crucial prerequisite, a big size for taking part in that. You could argue that you see that first for the United States, and with China as the only serious challenger when it comes to those giant digital companies. And you could say that for other parts of the world, it points in the direction of a need to move towards regional integration into bigger unions, like in Latin America and Europe, etc., in order to reach critical scale. And the question, as I come back to here, is one issue is, should you try to build Facebook? You already have something like that, but Google, Microsoft, etc., by Indian with an Indian ownership. Should you try to do that? If you want that, you need to invest heavily in infrastructure, digital infrastructure, computer centers, supercomputers, etc. And you would need to protect your own data, to give preferential access for Indian companies. Would that help to solve problems of inequality? I'm not sure. It would mean that some of the profit, perhaps more of it, produced by your own data remains in India. But it could also raise more radical issues. I mean, we are talking about critical resources and infrastructures, like railway, telecommunication, etc. And it could raise issues. Should this be owned by private operators, or should the state at the kind of regional or federal level go in as an owner? And is that good? I mean, would you like to have the state to control all personal data? Perhaps not. So we are in a very delicate, difficult situation because of this concentration. And of course, ideal solutions could be some democratic, cooperative ownership or something like that. But it's still very difficult to see the really good solutions in these areas. The first step is to realize what's going on. And the next step is, of course, to raise a discussion what to do about it.
Okay. Bal, you have given us almost 1.5 hours. I think we will stop questions with those have already come. There are 2 questions. We will stop with that. We don't want to strain you too much. That's it.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I tell you when I can take more.
You are young, we are getting old. I think that's the problem. Anyway, so Tyagi says, Tyagi wrote, what is this? Yeah, Tyagi wrote, thank you, Bal. It was very insightful and encouraging advice which you have given. Now, coming to Dr. Perman Arora, whom you may remember, he came to Aalborg in 95 for the project. He is a very big man now. I think he's almost controlling the Department of Science and Technology. No, sorry, this is a public talk. He's a big official in the Department of Science and Technology. He asked the question, we would like to have your opinion on leadership, innovation, and governance. Leadership, innovation, and governance in the NSI perspective and its effect on NSI effectiveness, how effective the NSI is, wherein what is the role of leadership and governance. These are all, yeah, little complicated question, I suppose. Maybe go, yeah.
I mean, I am uncertain if there is one single model of ideal leadership and governance, but I think there are choices that can be made. I mean, I think there are different ways of leading and managing which can work. And if that is the case, I strongly prefer one which is, I mean, inclusive, and which is based on kind of interactive approach where leaders stimulate people in organizations by taking their interests and needs seriously, by listening and by giving feedback, and I think that that kind of leadership. I worked on something I call learning organizations, and I think the good leader is one who establish a relationship between people, which makes the organization to renew itself almost by itself. I sometimes said that the really good leader is one who can go to the golf course. I don't do that myself, but one who can go to the golf course and play a lot of golf and still come back, and the organization has developed into something even better in his absence. But perhaps that is too idealistic. I don't know if this is a kind of response to the question. Perhaps the questioner want to follow up. I'm sorry if I.
I think
sorry.
Dr. Parveen can write to you. I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Rishi, there is another question on the chat mode. This is from Krishna Priya, an young scholar. She's asking the question, which is starting with COVID. The current COVID crisis has transformed the nature of work, innovation, and interaction. Work from home is the norm, and interactions are largely virtual, like what we are doing now. No hugging, no face-to-face, no smiling. Yeah, okay. Moreover, globalization has received a setback as supply chains were thoroughly disturbed and movement of people and capital are restricted. Many economies, including India, are focusing on self-reliance. India, self-reliance was a very important thing during the planning period, and after 1990s, that became the most nasty term. Now, self-reliance is coming up. Now, the question which she asking is, do you think this will have a long-term impact on innovation?
I think yes and no. I think it will. I think we will see already. We already see that you will get somewhat more use of digital communication in education. We will see more in health systems. We will see more in all kinds of organizations. More communication taking place by electronic media. I think that is going to stay, and you can say it might be a first step towards moving even further in that direction as digital technologies develop even more. but at the same time, I think there will be some counter tendencies because there are important limits in this kind of communication. I mean, there's something you can communicate when you are face to face, when you have the chance to smell each other and touch each other, which cannot be communicated in the same way through electronic media. So I don't think we will, and of course, I think all experiences indicate that if we go too far in using these kind of methods in education, for instance, it will become inefficient and it will be biased towards learning. I talk to my younger friends here and I ask them, how did this work when you had education by computer? We had that here in Denmark. And they said in some topics, some it worked reasonably well, but in others it didn't work at all. So I think we will develop towards selective use of these kind of digital media, combined with some emphasis on meeting person to person. And perhaps meeting person to person will become more and more kind of luxury good we will really appreciate. And we will be willing to accept some costs for having that. So I think it's also correct, as was said, that globalization has had a further setback and the idea of self-sufficiency has grown, and to some degree, sometimes what's happening in capitalism is that trajectories are taken too far. And I think the globalization trajectory was taken too far in the form of just in time. And what was realized during the COVID crisis is that this is not acceptable when we meet with the unexpected. So some people say we need to go more in the direction of not just in time, but just in case. If I think we are going to experience in the future further kind of not only epidemics, but also other natural developments which are not really under our control anymore. And there, I think we need to have a preparedness which needs to be organized at some level. And if it's not organized at the national level, it needs to be organized at the regional level or somewhere else. So I think some of this reduction of global interdependence might be seen as a necessary correction. But it's true that if we go too far in that direction, it will have major costs in terms of lack of sharing of knowledge, and it might make it even more difficult to meet the global challenges of climate change, global health issues, economic inequality, etc. So it's about finding a balance in the future in both those respects. Thank you.
Rishi, shall we conclude? I think it's already 5:45.
I think we should. Yes, I think we should.
We should. Okay. Rishi has anything to say? Rishi, you have anything to say, please?
I don't have anything to say. I think it was a wonderful interaction, and Bal, thanks a lot for all your insights, particularly the historical perspective, which was very useful for all of us, particularly for the younger scholars. And I think it's also a good lesson for all of us that you continue to keep connected with what's going on, with the latest technological developments, with the latest political and economic developments, and how these impact the study of innovation. Wonderful, very inspiring. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
No, we are Lakwinder. Lakwinder, Professor Lakwinder, are you online? I would like you to give the official thanks. No, if I think he has some connectivity problem. So
Okay.
I told you that we in India we believe in ceremoniously and we are very official. We are not very informal. Okay, so we want to very formally thank you. And since I remember for organizing the Globalix here, both Rishi and me got a hug from you. We thought you will bring some nice gift from Denmark. And you gave big hug. So we would have reciprocated you with a big hug today for spending this wonderful time with us. And I must say that you, Professor Bal, you are as active and as dynamic you are. So it was very insightful, and we enjoyed spending time with you. What we can do is we are going to give you a permanent invitation for all Indialics activities. That's what we want to give you something. So I thought we will do that, and we, on behalf of all the members of Indialics who have signed in and who are going to potentially see this, and especially our young scholars and the steering committee members, we give you a big applause and a big salute and thank you. Hope we would survive this COVID time, and we will get back to India and we will meet each other sooner. Let us hope for the best. And Mamo, how are you? Bal, you have anything to say? Final word?
So lovely to see Ba and all of you.
Okay, that's great.
I'm so happy. And I listened to him. Very nice. I learned a lot from him, as always.
Okay, that's good.
So it's wonderful
Can I
to see
say
him.
something?
He looks very young still.
Yes,
He
Thank
must
you.
live a long life.
May I
That's
say
good.
something? May I say something?
Please.
Please. Yes.
No, it was a pleasure interacting with you and the other in the audience. I think there is. I hope to see some of you in Costa Rica next year, the GlobalX conference. I know that the Indian delegation is normally quite big. I hope you will find possibility to finance your participation, and I hope to see Mamo as well. I could see he was very impatient to get into saying something, so I'm glad he got the chance. He's a very nice guy, and Joseph, I wish you all good with managing GlobalX and bringing it to and Indialics and bringing it all into the future. And I hope all the young people listening will try to do the best they can within the restrictions they have to accept in the academic world. Not always easy to do interesting and useful work which can change the world into a better place for themselves and the coming generations. So thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Bal. It was a great pleasure. And I know that you always look for the large Indian contingent, which was always more than 20, 25 in all the GlobalX conferences. And we will keep that tradition. We'll try to keep up that tradition. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Rishi, thank you very
Bring them
much.
all the time.
All of
Hug,
you
hug.
for joining. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch.
Sure, sir.